Hello and welcome to Skills to Pay the Bills and today's segment of Build Your Difference. My name is Pierre Walters, co-founder and CEO of Brand Desk, where we work directly with visionaries to help build successful businesses and impressive brands. Part of growing your business means making a plan, a strategic route that you'll take to get from where you are to where you want to be. Success is not an accident. It's a deliberate choice that you can make for your business. And on this episode of Build Your Difference, we'll discuss the steps that you can take to build your own strategic plan for growth in your business and on social media. So let's get started. So success on social media or in your business really comes down to planning out a path. Now, you're not going to know every step that path is going to take, but you know what? What matters is that you've taken the time to create that plan. Now, a lot of us know what a business plan is. We've heard of it. Some of us have taken the time to do it. Some of us look at a business plan and go, oh my God, that is way too much to have to kind of figure out. You know what? Both perspectives are valuable. It can be a lot of work depending on where your vision is going to take you. And it can also be very simple and easy to do depending on, you know, if your vision is something that can be relatively simply executed. So it's totally relative. But what you want to do is take that idea of a business plan and just kind of put it over on the corner. Because what I want to talk to you about is building an action plan, which is a much easier thing to kind of wrap your head around, and actually something that I have found has been just a much more practical thing to implement into my business and into my life. So how do you create an executive action plan? Well, you gotta start with a goal. You gotta start with a goal. Where or what is your destination? Is your destination to be, the leader in your particular industry? Is your destination to make a certain amount in revenue per year? What is the goal? So you gotta set that goal. Then you gotta break that goal into 3 steps. Now, you might be thinking, well, Pierre, what if my goal has much more than 3 steps? I know. But I want you to think in terms of threes. Three is the magic number. I think of a good story, any story, really has 3 components. It's got a beginning, it's got a middle, and it's got an end. So it's got 3 components. I mean, yes, you could say that, there's rising actions and falling actions, and there's a climax, and there's a resolution, and all that kind of stuff. But really, in the nuts and bolts of it, is at the beginning, and the middle, and an end. And so if you can break down your vision, your sort of big, hairy, audacious goal into 3 easy steps, the beginning, the middle, and the end, you've got the basic formula for the path that you need to take to get there. Now, each of those steps you then further break down into 3 sub-steps. So you have your first beginning step, then you've got 3 sub-steps to take before you get to that middle step. Then you've got another 3 sub-steps to take before you get to that final step. And then you have another 3 steps to take, which would conclude the journey, in other words. So what I often do, and I do think that this would be very valuable for you if you think about it in this way, is you take your goal and you split that into 3 steps, and then you split each step into 3 further sub-steps. That right there is the foundation for your executive action plan, okay? Now, can it get complicated? Yes, it can get complicated, but it doesn't really have to be. What's important is that you understand the steps that you're taking. And I often say, if I encounter a goal, or if I encounter a challenge that is just like too much for me to consider, or it's overwhelming, or it feels like I'm up against a brick wall or whatever, the first thing that I do, once I've kind of, wrapped my head around the fact that, Pierre, you're freaking out, don't freak out, calm down. Once I've kind of, gained my composure and wrapped my head around the fact that it's time to get into solutions mode, I then think about immediately, how can I turn this into an action plan? What is my action plan going to be to resolve this particular goal or this particular challenge? So the first thing that I do is I break down my path into 3 steps. Then I break down each of those steps into 3 steps. So I have a total of 9 steps that I need to take to complete this particular challenge or to meet this particular objective. After all, how do you eat an elephant? 1 bite at a time, right? So no matter how big your vision is or how big that goal is, you can accomplish it, you can achieve it if you break it down into 1 step at a time. Now, what are some common action plans, okay? One common action plan might be you have this idea to start a business. You say, you know what, I want to start a business as a podcaster, okay? I'm just gonna throw that out there. I wanna start a podcast. I want that to be my business. I need to make an action plan to break this down into 3 steps with 3 steps. So what's my 9-step action plan? Well, step number 1 is, okay, what am I going to talk about, right? Okay. Step number 2 is, so that whole first step would be, what am I going to talk about? Step number 2 is, how am I going to produce this? Like, what am I going to do in terms of production, right, for my podcast? And then step number 3 would be distribution, right? Once I'm done with production, it's ready to get distributed, how do I get it out there? How do I get more people to hear about it? So that's my 3-step plan. I need to somehow achieve, what am I talking about? How am I going to do it? And how am I going to distribute it? Now, I'm going to take those 3 steps and I'm going to break them each down into 3 further steps. So in terms of the podcast, I'm starting with this podcast. I know I want to, my first step is, what is my actual goal? I mean, what is my actual topic I want to talk about? So I'm gonna break that down into 3 sub-steps by saying, number 1, who's my audience? What do they want to hear? Number 2, what is it that I know I can speak confidently about? Okay, and number 3, what bridges that gap? So if my audience is entrepreneurs, and I know I can speak confidently about, very specifically, let's say I can speak confidently about video production, okay? Then number 3 would be, in that list of 3 sub-steps, number 3 would be, I'm going to talk to entrepreneurs about video production. All right, so I'm going to put together maybe a top 10 list of, here are the things entrepreneurs need to know about video production. Maybe if they have if they're making a YouTube channel, or if they're, speaking to their audience on camera, whatever the case may be, here are here's what they need to know. Here are the 10 things they need to know in order to do that. Okay, so that's going to be my whole entire first step. Get that down. Get those 3 steps accomplished. Okay, I'm done with that. Now I'm moving into production. So I know I got to produce this podcast. What are the 3 steps I need to take in order to actually create the episode? Well, number 1, I need to make sure I have a mechanism to record it. So step number 1 is make sure I have my materials and my tools in place. My iPad, my microphone, GarageBand, the application, or whatever application I'm going to use. Make sure all that's set. Number 2, date and time. I'm going to sit down on this date and time, and I'm going to record the podcast. And number 3, on that date and time, I'm going to make sure that I record the podcast and take the time that I need to make sure that I'm editing myself as I go, but also partnering with someone who can sort of do a post-production sweep of the episode that I've just recorded when I'm done. Maybe they'll catch things that maybe I missed, okay? So that's my 3-step plan for production, okay? Making sure I have my materials, making sure I have my date and time, and making sure I have someone who can do a pass on the episode when I'm finished to kind of clean it up for me. An editor, for lack of a better term. Now, going into that 3rd and final overall step or macro step would be distribution. Break that down into 3 steps. So the first step for distribution might be uploading it to the internet, right? Finding a website that you can upload it to. And I always recommend anchor.fm. I think it's fantastic. So let's say you're going to use that, upload the podcast to anchor.fm. That's step number 1. Step number 2 is make sure that it is successfully distributed through their channels. Okay, so you got to give it a title, you got to give it a description, and you want to make sure that it is being successfully distributed through all the channels that are connected to Anchor.fm. And the final step, this is the 9th step in that process, okay? The 3rd step in that last sort of distribution goal is I now need to tell everyone I know about this particular episode. I'm going to send a blast out on social media, put it in my email marketing campaign so my recipients who receive that can get it. And I'm going to talk about it to everyone I know so that they know that that episode exists. Now, that is my entire action plan. And if you take anything that you know you want to do and break that down into an action plan like that, okay, now I don't know if you need to do exactly what I just did, but the formula is sound. And if you take the time to break down the steps that you need to take for whatever goal it is you want to accomplish, that goal is going to seem much, much more doable. And the more doable it seems, the less of an excuse we all have for not getting it done. Okay, now how can this translate to something like, say, social media? Because another part of building a plan is not just for business growth, but also for maybe success on social media. We call that a social media action plan. And on social media, it really boils down to these 4 very simple items. Number 1 is we need to determine our social media audience. Number 2, which brands on social media do we want to be affiliated with? Number 3, which people do we want to be affiliated with on social media? So, brands and people. Brands would be companies, corporations, entities that are more than just one person, whereas a person is just maybe an influencer or a famous personality or something like that. So we want to determine who do we want to be affiliated with in both those realms. And then finally, what sources of approved content do we want to use to sort of repurpose content from? So in other words, do I want to go to Forbes.com and look at their blog? Is that going to be an approved source for my social media plan? Because if so, I can go to Forbes.com and I can look at what they're posting on their blog, and I can take inspiration from those blog articles to then create my posts for my social media channels. Finally, and lastly, how often will you post? Is it once a week? Is it once a day? Is it once every other day? Those are the things to think about for your social media action plan. Now look, we're going to take a quick break, but I want you to stay with us because we're going to learn more when we come back about how you can develop a strong action plan for your business.
Hi, I'm Josh Temple. You might have seen me on TV where I help folks turn their houses into dream homes. But forget construction. Parenting is the toughest job there is. So when you need help or advice, turn to the parenting experts at Boys Town.
Welcome back to Skills to Pay the Bills and this segment of Build Your Difference. Today, we're discussing how anyone can build a strong action plan for growth. So, how do you take action with an action plan? Well, look, before the break, we talked about what an action plan actually consists of. Remember, it's taking any big, hairy, audacious goal, any a challenge that we find ourselves up against, and breaking it down into 3 primary steps. I usually call it a beginning, a middle, and an end, and then breaking each of those steps down into 3 sub-steps. So you'll have a total of 9 steps to take to get you from where you are now to where success is at the end of that journey or at the end of that path. So now that you have your plan, okay, how do you actually go about executing that plan? All right, and I'm thinking more sort of holistically. The first thing that I want to say is that we have to build in time to our schedule to check in on our status on our plan, okay, on our action plan. So I would say at the start of every week, we're doing a check-in, and at the end of every week, we're doing a check-in. So when you begin every week on a Monday, you should have your action plans in front of you, and you should say, okay, here's where we are. Here's where we are right now on this action plan. And by the end of this week, I want to get to this step in the action plan, okay? Whether that's step 2 or the sub-step number 2, whatever it is, you identify what your goal is to have accomplished by the end of that week on that action plan so that you can move the needle, okay? Now at the end of the week, you're gonna come back to the action plan and you're gonna check to see, did I achieve the goal that I set for myself at the beginning of the week for this particular part, of the action plan. Now you don't need to complete the entire action plan, but we just wanna move the needle. We wanna move from where we are at the beginning of the week to where we want to be by the end of the week. And at the end of the week, we're gonna check in to make sure that we actually did that. Here's something I really wanna impress on you, okay? Because if you're anything like me, we're visual people, all right? And I need to have things in front of me in order to keep them front of mind. And when I have an action plan, one of the first things that I do, especially if it's a very important plan or the goal or the challenge is something that's very important to me, is I will print that out. I will actually print out the action plan on a big poster and I will put it on my wall so that I can see my action plan and I know exactly where it is at any point of the day, okay? So if I'm sitting at my computer and I'm working and maybe I'm getting sidetracked or I'm doing a bunch of other things and my eyes start to wander, they will wander to that action plan because it's so big and it's on the wall, and just from being there, I'll know, oh, I've got to keep that front of mind. I need to come back to that. This is something I need to get done this week. So what I'm going to say to you is consider finding a way to visualize your action plan, whether that's making it look nice and printable and then printing it out on poster paper. Look, this whole thing you can get done for less than $10 at FedEx, okay? Really, just you can print it out on nice poster paper and put it on the wall so that it's there. Or you can write it on a chalkboard if you happen to have that, or a whiteboard if you happen to have that. For me, I like to get them printed out because I like them to be very visually engaging. And then I'll put it on the wall where it has nice, lots of colors, shapes and stuff is what I'll put on an action plan. And that way it's always there front of mind. Do the same, okay? Figure out a way to keep it visual so that it's not hidden in your phone somewhere or hidden in a book somewhere, but that it's in front of you. Wherever it is that you sit down and do your work, that action plan is in front of you in that environment, okay? And it's physical, it's tangible. It's a thing that you can actually touch and feel. It's not just on a computer, okay, or on a cell phone. Now, any goal or step that is difficult, you want to remember to break that down into sub-steps. So this is going to go back to the whole point of an action plan in the first place, which is to make any goal achievable or accomplishable. Whatever that challenge is, there is a way for you to get it done by breaking it down into a total of 9 steps. But this here, in terms of taking action on those 9 steps, is to say, look, if any of these steps along the way is more challenging than you anticipated it should be or would be, then you take that particular step and you turn that into its own action plan. Okay, so now you've got an action plan for an item on the other action plan. So what ends up happening here is that you'll have a sort of master plan, a sort of master action plan, okay? And then you'll have minor action plans that are designed to help achieve each of the tasks in that master action plan. That makes sense, right? It really comes together nicely. And by doing it this way, you're always encouraging yourself, saying, look, there is no reason, there is no excuse for me to not achieve my goals, because my goals are clearly mapped out. They are clearly defined. And anytime I encounter a challenge or an obstacle along the way, I know the secret to achieving or overcoming that particular obstacle, which is to make another action plan. Now, look, don't be surprised if you end up with a master action plan, a sub-action plan, and then a sub-action plan. Don't be surprised if you have many, many action plans. In fact, in Brand Desk, there's a function in Brand Desk to just create as many action plans as you need. And so we have the ability to create as many executive action plans as you need, as many social media action plans as you need. In fact, we even have the ability to create what are called revenue action plans, which is, I mean, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's basically an action plan for revenue. What are the steps I need to take to generate the amount of revenue that I want to be able to, to generate? And if you look at any obstacle in that manner, you can very easily, well, I'm going to take back the word easily. I don't mean easy in terms of simplicity. I don't mean easy in terms of lack of effort. What I mean is easy in terms of clarity. It's clear. It is the hard work is just in getting it done, but not in knowing what needs to get done. And for me, and if you're anything like me, that is really where a lot of the stress comes. A lot of the stress comes in this sort of unknown. What is it that I actually need to do? Because if you could just tell me what I need to do, then I can just get it done. But a lot of us don't know what actually we need to do, and that's where the stress comes in. That's where the doubt comes in. That's where a lot of the procrastination comes in, because we simply just don't know what the next step actually is. And so this is going to totally and completely solve that problem. I want to end this episode by giving you a small anecdote. I remember in 2015 when I had the idea for something like Brand Desk. I mean, at the time, my business was more of an agency, so customers would come. I would directly work with customers, and then it was a very sort of direct relationship. But my vision was, with something like Brand Desk, was to develop a platform where other people could just come to the platform and engage with other professionals without me needing to be involved to achieve their vision, or to achieve their goals, or to achieve their dream. Now, this sounds like a simple thing, but what you wouldn't believe this, but it took me from 2015, 2016, and 2017, so almost 2 to 3 years just to clarify that vision. Just to clarify precisely what it was that actually I wanted to be able to achieve. I knew kind of the direction I wanted to go in, but I didn't have it I didn't have the tools to be able to articulate specifically what that path actually looked like. So I had to go get myself educated. I had to take a whole bunch of these workshops to learn more about different sort of business models, different sort of ways of handling finances, handling investors. What is even a platform? What types of platforms are there? There's so much that I had to kind of dip my toe into to kind of familiarize myself with. And the more that I did this over the course of about 2 to 3 years, I started to really refine my vision, and really refine what Brand Desk would ultimately become. And once that vision became clear for me, the first thing that I did, as soon as it became clear, by the way, that was like a aha moment. As soon as it became clear, I sat down and made an action plan. I literally mapped out exactly the 9 steps that I needed to take in order to get me from my old business to this brand new concept, this brand new business that I wanted to get into that didn't exist. And over the course of the following years, I broke down each of those steps into smaller sub-steps, into smaller action plans, and just spent the next 3 years really chipping off tasks on that action plan, or on those action plans. And while I was in it, it felt like it was never going to end. It felt like, oh my goodness, every single time I hit a new obstacle, I have to make a whole new action plan. Oh my goodness, it's just, is this ever going to get done? I mean, it's like I take 1 step forward, 2 steps back, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. That's kind of how it felt. But it felt that way because I was in it. It felt that way because I was in build mode, which is a thing that I often say. I mean, build mode is the mode where your head is sort of underwater, or not underwater is probably not the right term, but your head is sort of underground, and you are focused on specifically what it is that you're building, right? So that was me, and I was just like completely engrossed in this, taking one step forward and what felt like two steps back. But before I knew it, it was 3 years later. And before I knew it, when I looked back at my action plans, I saw check marks, check marks, check marks, check marks, check marks, check marks. Things were getting accomplished. And not only were things getting accomplished, but the platform was being built. What existed as just an idea, a concept in my mind was it was sort of flowering like a garden, and I mean it was growing in front of my face, and I really didn't even realize it was happening until I reached the end of that term, and I could sit back and sort of look at, oh my God, look at what we've created. That is your journey. And if you can take the time to break your business vision or goal or obstacle into an action plan, you can get into build mode, and before you know it, if you stick with it and if you stay persistent and persevere, you'll get to the end of that action plan and you will have achieved your goals. Thank you. Thank you for watching Skills to Pay the Bills and today's segment of Build Your Difference. Remember, success is planned. It's not by accident. It's a deliberate choice. Now, most small businesses fail to plan, which means that they are planning to fail. And we can determine how successful we want our businesses to be and grow simply by designing the success we envision in an action plan. And if you're just beginning, be sure to start your journey with an executive action plan, one that you can revisit every few months, as we've discussed today. Damon John, founder and president and CEO of FUBU, famously said, 5 days a week, I read my goals before I go to sleep and when I wake up. There are 10 goals around health, family, and business with expiration dates, and I update them every 6 months. So let's challenge ourselves as business owners to do the same. And as you build your difference in the marketplace, take care to plan your steps deliberately. And if receiving guidance would be helpful in your journey, you can learn more at my website, www.pierrewalters.com. Remember, the words of author Octavia Butler. It's amazing what we can do if we simply refuse to give up.